Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on reducing the burden of enterprise identity management in SAP environments. My name is Chris Riley. I am with Security Boulevard, your host for today's webinar, and we are going to hear from One Identity. Alex and Cengiz are going to talk to us about what we already know, challenges around identity management, but specifically in environments like SAP, which are business and mission critical. Just a few logistics before I hand it over. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. So if you have any questions, look at your GoToWebinar questions dialog and type them there. And Alex will review those, and we can get to those either at the end or in the middle of the webinar. If there's any related to operations of the GoToWebinar interface, we will respond to them directly. And if we don't get to all of your questions, don't worry. This webinar is recorded. It will be sent out after a few days after the webinar closes, and you can share it with your peers. And then One Identity will get back to you with any specific questions that aren't answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex from One Identity.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. As Brian mentioned, I'm Alex Bonotto, product manager within the One Identity group. Great pleasure to have with me today Cengiz, one of our solutions architect, which will be helping with the presentation as well. Let's move forward. So quickly, just to highlight the agenda, I think Brian kind of mentioned as well, the whole idea is that we want to talk a little bit briefly about identity and access management and its challenges that we already know, but nevertheless, the challenge just gets a bit more complicated when you add SAP into the mix, and even now more and more, not the on-prem SAP systems, but we're also going to be briefly talking about SAP cloud applications, which are becoming more prevalent and requires a vast need as well to integrate into your current identity and access management processes. We will look at some of the challenges of managing SAP through your IAM process. I mean, there's obviously a lot more challenges that we can cover on this call. So we're going to pick 2 to 3 kind of main points that tends to be the most prevalent kind of pain points that you have from integrating SAP through your IAM process, and we'll address that. And then obviously we'll kind of walk you through some of those scenarios as well to show you how with One Identity and its One Identity management product, we can try to solve some of these challenges and overall reduce the burden that you may have with managing SAP or integrating your SAP as part of your identity and access management project. All right, so IAM, as we all know, it's a security principle. Really, the whole essence of identity and access management is to enable the right individuals to have the right access to the right resources at the right times for the right reason, right? So that shouldn't be any news to anyone. But one of the more challenging problems that you see in identity access management, it's dealing with the array of the actual entitlements that a user may have access to, right? If I look at the simple question, say, where does Alex have access to? Who has access to those specific resources? This tends to be, or who gave him that access, from a pure identity, if we're looking at from a pure application standpoint, which it predominantly has been driven by group membership, it may not seem like a difficult task to actually try to implement. It's obviously having the right solution in place as well. You can probably have a well-defined process where we're providing that level of access and then be able to verify as well. The unfortunate nature is that when you add complex applications like SAP, for example, which has a totally different model, and it's not just has lots of applications, the concept of actual multiple clients, profiles, roles, even menus, and down to transaction kind of codes itself. The ability to just kind of do some sort of a group management that doesn't really fit in here, right? It's that user group model doesn't fit with SAP. because obviously the complexity is there. So from an SAP standpoint, you need to also take into consideration of the other components that may come in place, and trying to resolve this. The relationship between beyond just users and groups sometimes becomes almost impossible. And then you add in some of, once you think that you've mastered that SAP model for the on-prem, then you introduce with the cloud applications. We have SAP Cloud Platform, SAP Ariba, SAP Concur, SAP SuccessFactors. Those applications as well have come from different acquisitions. Some have been homegrown. Each of those applications itself has its own data model, which most often has no compatibility with the existing on-prem SAP systems. So then you end up with this model that you have to, it's just from a simplistic point of view of being able to actually provision a user to these various applications. And you're not dealing with one central data model. You're dealing with multiple data models. You're dealing with the ability that you have to then correlate and have some sort of an anchor identity that has the capability to correlate to the various accounts based on their model, so that you can then properly manage those systems, right? So the challenges then, obviously, it's kind of mentioned something like this. When we see it's true because of the whole nature of SAP and its own data model, we see often enough enterprises kind of segregate or create silo approach from a management standpoint. They may just want to concentrate on SAP because it's obviously one of their most enterprise-worthy applications, but the grow in need from an identity and access management standpoint grows, and it becomes almost impossible to try to merge those systems, and so people tend to then segregate and manage those two separately, which of course creates complexity, creates additional cost. There's no way from a global perspective that you have a visual or a central view of your identities and the access that the identities have from the entire heterogeneous or environment that you have. That single view from a particular user, it's nearly impossible, right? I can't have a pinpoint and understand exactly where these SAP accounts reside, to which of the SAP systems, or perhaps even now when you introduce cloud, which of these cloud platforms is that SAP account coming from. As I mentioned, the silo approach results really in the redundancy of the platforms. Difficult to actually even try to create an entitlement model if you're trying to base on a particular role, and even from a joiners or leaver perspective, you'd like to have some sort of automated, as new individuals come to the organization, you want to be able to assign a birthright roles that would ultimately provide them access to these various applications, so that in day one, the individuals can start running right away. It becomes obviously very cumbersome if you're trying to do that from multiple systems or having to manage these environments separately. As well, when we talk about separation of duties, or just from a compliance standpoint, which is prevalent in these days, very difficult to actually try to enforce these rules across these various platforms. I know SAP does a really good job from an SAP GRC standpoint, but it's specific to SAP. So what happens when you add different other systems? How do you correlate all the information from a central repository, right? Another, one of the things we're just gonna, I guess, from a overall challenge standpoint, we're going to try to just cover a couple of items. One, obviously, the SAP user account challenge, which tends to be a very prevalent issue, and something that has to be dealt with, even if you're just doing managing SAP from SAP standpoint. But as you adding SAP as part of your overall identity and access management processes, that obviously comes into play. If you look at it, right, from just that graphical representation, normally SAP authorization kind of is the protector, right? It protects transactions, it protects programs and services within each of the SAP systems from an authorization access standpoint. So this is how, for a user to access a business object or execute a specific SAP transaction, a user will require to have that corresponding authorization. And as you know, it's seen just from a diagram standpoint, it can become very quickly cumbersome in no time. And typically, from an SAP admin standpoint, well, what do you need to do? Well, obviously, you need to assign that authorization to that particular user so that he or she has that control, that action that can be executed within an SAP system. Well, first and foremost, right, if you look at it, you need to create that master record for each of the users. Each of the users must have some sort of has to have a master record, or SAP master record, I should say, that allows the users first to log in to a specific SAP system, but then using the master record itself, administrator at that point, SAP administrator, would then assign one role to a particular, or determine the activity that individuals. The challenge that we see here is that master records are client specific. So meaning, right? So if you need to maintain a master record for each of the client, and you need to create that particular master record, or that account, that SAP account, in each of the SAP systems that you have. Now, obviously, if you have one system, it may not be as cumbersome as that, but the customers that we normally talk to, we're talking about tens or hundreds of different SAP systems, which becomes very difficult, having to centralize that. Obviously, as I mentioned, large-scale deployments, it's very difficult to have that. It becomes a very tedious task of actually having to create and then having to authorize that user on one or all different systems. The next kind of main challenge that we want to cover today's presentation is around SAP compliance, and more specific around segregation of duty rules, right? So if you're looking from a compliance checking, segregation of duty, so on, it is necessary to really, is there to kind of ensure kind of corporate policies and compliance, and more with different standards that are in place, or different. You have that. You have to have a good grasp on how those rules are being executed, how are they correlated to one or multiple SAP accounts, and so on. So look, simple example would be, rules like an employee may obtain two entitlements. You can't have like entitlement A and B at the same time. Perhaps you have an employee with a particular department, and that with a particular permissions, or perhaps an SAP authorization to a particular SAP system. Could be a simple compliance, company compliance, that every account, in other words, every account, or a more specific SAP account, needs to have a manager assigned to it, right? And you would say, well, normally SAP provides, and I already mentioned the SAP GRC module. It's for rule checks and so on. It's SAP's framework for looking at from an SAP standpoint. And obviously, there are some excellent, it provides excellent capabilities from looking at the rules and mindset. However, if you're looking at it from a pure SAP standpoint, one of the disadvantages of just using the SAP itself, SAP GRC, is that the rules obviously are executed independently on every single SAP account. There's no really reference to a business dependencies, and then obviously you end up with the actual relationship of those particular accounts in specific to the identity. Not included on the actual calculations itself. So you ended up with like that subordinate account, or the sub accounts don't get included as part of that GRC rules, and therefore you may not have the right visualization of actually the potential rules that those accounts may be breaking. And of course, the other kind of deficiency is the no cross platform. So if you're specific to SAP, yes, you can obviously execute those rules in SAP, but when you start to adding other platforms like Active Directory or other applications, Oracle, Azure, and so on, it becomes very difficult for you to apply the same rules to the various platforms in a way to have that central view from that perspective. So one of the things to do from one identity standpoint, and what helps us kind of bring this to the table, is that we base it off our identity governance administration framework called Identity Manager. As you can see here in the middle, it's obviously it's one of the products that has been in the market for a long time, dealing with identity store and role management, provisioning, deprovisioning, specific things that are part of the every major IGA solution. A very robust then connectivity to the various SAP system, fully certified connector that we have for the SAP on-prem that supports R3 and SAP S/4HANA on-prem. Obviously, another connector to the various SAP HANA databases itself. And then for the cloud applications where where the growth of those cloud applications are becoming increasingly high, we have a middle layer, which is called One Identity Starling Connect, that leverages the SCIM connector within Identity Manager to talk to the various cloud applications. Obviously, the slide is specific to SAP, but the application itself can talk to many other cloud applications that there is in place.
Okay, so in the following, we will show you some of the SAP account management challenges and how they can be solved using Identity Manager. I will be showing screenshots from the administration interface of the One Identity Manager, depicting the deep integration of SAP and One Identity Manager. When we move on to the SAP System and Client Overview slide, we will see One Identity Manager's view on the SAP landscape. This view and the following views on the next slides are called Hyperview and allow the navigation through all the shown objects. So by clicking off any object in the view, the object will be centered on the selected object, and the relationship of this object will be displayed. The relationship of this object to the other object will be displayed. When we synchronize an SAP system, we start with a system overview and the connected SAP system. I'm sorry, can you just go back a slide? Thank you. When we synchronize this the overview of the connected SAP system, we will see the SAP system overview. And one SAP system can always contain multiple clients, which allow for splitting a system into logical units, as you can see here as well. Each client provides separate SAP modules, for example, finance, sales and distribution, customer relationship management, human capital management or HR modules, or instances of the same module for different organizations or business units. The client is the focus unit from an IGA perspective. Because the client contains user master data, group information, roles, and profiles, One Identity Manager connects to a specific client and synchronizes the data of that specific client. However, One Identity Manager can also connect on more clients or all clients on that system and synchronize all that information from all the clients. So as Alex mentioned earlier, if customers having up to hundreds of SAP systems with as many SAP clients, as you can see here, the number of manageable or units to be managed in the identity management space or from an identity management perspective is growing exponentially. While synchronizing client-specific information into One Identity Manager, we also synchronize system-specific information. So as you can see here, we know about the number of licenses and login languages configured on that SAP system. These system-specific information define limitations or functionality of the clients as well. So you can only assign licenses that are available on a system to an account on a specific client on that system. Sub-license and license measurement is a science in SAP. So SAP user licensing is usually carried out based on a thing called system measurement. This can be activated for a client in One Identity Manager, and the Identity Manager will keep track of this information. Basically, if an employee has several SAP user accounts on various clients on the same system, the most privileged user account or the most privileged account only requires an SAP license. This is being maintained and provisioned back to an SAP client, so the system measurement can be executed on the SAP system. So when we continue on clicking to the specific client that we have synchronized, we will see more detailed information about the client. So in this view, we see the SAP client in the center. And in our case, the synchronized client is the client ID, has the client ID 800. And we see that the client 800 is part of an SAP system called DSG, as we saw on the previous slide, and that this client is a CA central system, currently managing 2 child systems, and which child systems these are. So CA is a commonly, a very common setup at customer sites. The central user administration was introduced prior to the IGA world and simplifies user maintenance in environment with multiple SAP systems. One specific SAP client is promoted to be master, and other clients are connected and assigned as subordinates to this master. These clients do not necessarily have to reside on the same SAP system. In our case, however, these SAP clients are on the, no, they are not actually. So, sorry, they are on the same system, and both clients are being managed from the central system. Individual clients may stay independent and keep their own user management repository. So if you don't want to maintain all clients from a central user administration client, you can run them independently. One Identity Manager is capable of managing SAP clients independently through SAP CA or a combination of both, where some clients are managed through CA and others are managed directly by One Identity Manager. The client overview also shows the number of SAP user accounts on this client. The hyperview folds for a big number of objects, as you can see. So the SAP companies, cost centers, user accounts, groups, profiles, and roles that are being synchronized from this client are a big number. So the hyperview folds the items so it can display a better overview in this view. The client overview also shows SAP authorization, SAP BI user accounts. So SAP BI users are user accounts that are being assigned BI analysis permissions on a specific client. And this will grant these users access to all the clients, or give them read analysis permissions on all the clients where the user account exists. Client-specific meta information is also available and displayed in this example. As you can see, an account definition is associated with this client. One Identity Manager has account definitions for automatically allocating user accounts to employees. Account definitions constitute the permission to create an account on a specific target system instance with predefined rules and policies. So when we continue on focusing the SAP companies, we will see the relationship duration of an SAP company object within this environment. We have, in this view, selected a specific SAP company object from the list of available companies on the previous slide. And now we see that the company SAP AG and its relationship. In our example, 522 SAP user accounts on the system DSG are assigned to this company. Company objects are holding communication details for companies and can be assigned to users. They are not having permission relevant information. However, it's a grouping category used in SAP environments. Moving on to specific user account on this client will give us the following view, where the SAP user account is placed in the middle and the related objects are placed around the user object. Here you can see the SAP user account that is being assigned to a specific employee on which the user account lives along with the information that this user account has also access to child systems. So as you can see, this user account is a CA user account because the user account has also access to a child system, a user account always belongs to a specific employee. However, an employee can have one or more accounts assigned to him on a single client. We can also see that this user account has been assigned SAP roles, and those assignments have start and end dates. You may have realized that some of the role assignments are struck out. These role assignments are marked for deletion and will be removed later. The SAP user account is also responsible for SAP system approvals on a specific client. So this overview is SAP user-centric with all the roles and access to systems and the relationship to employees. Continuing with the SAP profile, we can see the overview information about SAP profiles and its relationships in the client. The overview centers on the Buchhalter profile and its relationship in that client. We can see that this profile is of type composite profile and is being contained in 3 other profiles, so also composite profiles, and itself contains 5 other profiles. One Identity Manager distinguishes between the following profile types, or it knows about the following profile types. So manual authorization profiles. These manual authorization profiles were created in previous versions of SAP, might still exist, and were used to minimize the editing effort. Generated authorization profiles are profiles that are being generated during the role administration from the role data. And composite profiles consist of any number of other authorization profiles. Profiles in SAP are the authorization carrying objects. The assignment of a profile will grant the required permission to an SAP user account and execute specific functions and programs in an SAP environment. Customers solving the SAP Compliance and SoD challenge with One Identity Manager can add additional details to profiles by synchronizing the SAP transactions and authorizations. In this case, profile information will also show the transaction and the transaction ranges that are associated with this profile. Moving on to SAP role details, we can see the overview of an SAP role in one identity manager. This SAP collective role TComp PCC contains 4 single roles and is being assigned to an SAP user account. In one identity manager, we know composite roles that consists of a number of single roles and single roles which are created with the role administration tool in SAP and allow the automatic generation of authorization profiles. The service item at the top left linked with the composite role is the requestable object in the One Identity Manager's own IT shop. One Identity Manager does not put the role or profile or group object itself into the shop to be requested by the end user, but creates a proxy object called service item. This will allow customers to use end user friendly names in the shop and additional description and add tags to the service item. So by requesting that service item, the associated profile or role will be assigned to the user account, but you will have end user friendly representation in the IT shop. So continuing to the continuing on the sub-user groups, we will see the relation of an SAP user object within this environment. The SAP user group super on this client has 125 user accounts assigned to it. Why or where are SAP user accounts user groups used? By assigning SAP users to user groups, you can distribute user maintenance among different user administrators. The system administrator then assigns the respective user administrator only the right to create and change users in this group. So when we continue to the next slide, we will address the compliance rule checking, segregation of duty and company policies that are necessary to ensure compliance. SAP provides, as Alex pointed out earlier, a governance, risk and compliance module for rule checks. This framework executes rules which have to be configured upfront within SAP. The main disadvantage of the SAP GRC module is that rules are executed on a single independent SAP account without any reference to business dependencies within the SAP system landscape. Any relationship to other SAP accounts such as subordinate employee identity is not included in the GRC rule calculation. Therefore, the risk is high that violations will not be detected. Cross-system rule checking is by design not possible with the sub-GRC module. Identity Manager closes this gap by including this SAP account relationship to employee identities within the Identity Manager repository. The biggest advantage is, however, the exploration of rule conflicts on the business level, which would have never been noticed by singular rule check execution on single SAP accounts. The more target systems managed, the greater the benefit of this approach will be. For example, in one customer situation, an SAP GRC rule execution claimed about 600 rule violations, whereas Identity Manager was able to prove that there were more than 16,000 violations within the same application infrastructure. Taking the identity approach and looking onto superordinate and subordinate identities and the and various accounts that are being linked to it will give you a comprehensive overview and better chances to find violations that are probably not being detected by other systems. So How is SAP Compliance and SOD checking implemented in One Identity Manager? So if we look on to the next slide, Alex, can we move to the next slide? Thank you. So how is the SAP Compliance and SOD checking implemented in One Identity Manager? The Identity Manager connector can read all the information from SAP required to define GRC functionality or abilities, or fine-grained permissions in SAP. An ability is defined by transactions and authorizations objects and value definitions for fields of an authorization object. Those fine-grained permissions are the defining elements of a profile, which can be assigned to a user account or first combined with roles and then assigned to a user account. These authorization objects and transactions and fields and values will not be displayed directly in the admin tool, but can be used to define these SOD rules. SAP authorizations are verified on the basis of transactions permitted for a user account and the associated authorization objects. To do this, you have to define the transactions and authorization objects you want to verify to be such SAP functions in the One Identity Manager. These SAP functions are rule templates for authorization matching. An SAP function instance will be created for each client to evaluate the SAP function definition in the context of a selected client. When we continue on to the next slide, we will see the function instance that has been created by applying the rule checking to a specific client. The One Identity Manager evaluates in the context of this client which profiles, roles, single or composite will be matching the specific transactions, and the result is a list of objects shown for this function instance. I'm sorry. Yeah. So as you can see, we are on the audit rule. Okay. As you can see, the audit rule here is the combination of the function instance and the audit rule shows the relationship and the configuration. The audit rule has a working copy, an enabled version. Each audit rule can be assigned to a specific compliance rule framework, has a rule supervisor and an exception approvers. Any new or old or approved rule violations matched by this audit rule will be visible in the overview. Mitigating controls that have been assigned to the audit rule would also show up on this overview. And when we continue to the next slide, please. You will see the detailed audit rule configuration. The audit rule allows, in this case, exception approvals. If you allow exception approvals, the group of exception approvers have to be selected. In this case, you can see in the drop-down field that the exception approvers is a Identity Manager internal role, and the members of this Identity Manager internal role will be asked for exception approvals if an exception is found or a violation has been found by this SOD rule. As you can see in the condition section of this rule, the rule applies to all employees, including their sub-identities, and checks for any combination of permissions matched by the two configured function instances. And further sub-rules can be added for checking, for example, business rule membership or any permission assignment for managing a target system that is being managed in this identity manager instance. So let's say if you have an Active Directory or if you have an LDAP or any other target system, you could match any additional permission that is being granted on those systems, and the combination of all these would constitute the SOD violation. A good example would be some SAP permission and on top of that some Active Directory group membership that would grant access to a specific folder on a share, and this is a combination that should not be possible, and that would be the violation. In our case, however, the SAD checking is only done for SAP systems, so no further target systems are considered. So when we look into the details, how are audit rules defined in detail, we can see on the next slide that SOD, that SAP audit rules consist of transactions, authorization objects, and fields. This audit rule checks for the assignment of the PFCG role maintenance transaction and the SU01 user maintenance transaction. These transactions themselves contain authorization objects, which contain fields and values. So, for example, in our case, the security policy authorization object for the SU01 transaction with the activity create, which is the value 01, create or generate on any policy, which is the field policy name with an asterisk at the bottom. In the context of the transaction, SU01 will be matched as a violation. So how can we configure this audit rule in the Identity Manager? When we continue to the next slide, the SAP Authorization Editor, which is part of the Identity Manager, will be used to define these function definitions. As shown in this screenshot, the Authorization Editor allows the configuration of these function definitions, and the Authorization Editor allows the addition of authorization objects to the rule through various methods, like added via menu template, added via transaction, added via authorization object, or added via existing function definitions. When you, for example, add a transaction or add a rule via transaction, the transaction and all its content will be added to the rule. As you can see here, the transaction PFCG has been added, and the contents of that transaction as synchronized from the SAP client has been added to the function definition. Once objects are added, specific fields can be removed or values can be changed to tailor a function definition to the needs of each customer. So far to the SOD challenges. On the next slides, I will introduce the SAP HR capabilities of the SAP connector, and the SAP connector of One Identity Manager does not only synchronize the user account information, but also the HR data from an SAP client. The One Identity Manager supports SAP as source and target system. In each case, the configuration is simply made by predefined templates for all the known schema objects, like employees, departments, work data in case of HR, like user accounts, role profiles in the case of SAP as a target system, like a ERP system. Additional schema objects, like jobs or positions in the context of an HR system, are known to the connector, but not mapped to objects in One Identity Manager database. These can be synchronized and mapped to internal objects or existing objects or extended objects in the customer environments. Additionally, customer-specific tables, so-called Z tables, that are required in some customer environments can easily be synchronized in one Identity Manager. The Identity Manager connector or the SAP connector can easily be extended using an XML configuration object, and the customer-specific information can be synchronized as well. As we see on the next slide, organization information from the source system will be synchronized directly into one Identity Manager. The mapping for this synchronization process is being delivered out of the box. So on the left-hand side, as you can see, is the OM module of SAP with the org tree for that client, which is then synchronized into the department tree in one Identity Manager. The SAP connector is evaluating the SAP SPOC mapping and retrieves the members of a department as well as the head of the organization, and makes this available in one Identity Manager database. This will allow you to design workflows that will leverage that information for approvals and access to specific shops and any further processes you might have. As we can see on the next slide, when everything comes together in that view, we are seeing the employee in the center in this view, because our Identity Manager is an employee-centric, has an employee-centric approach. We see all the additionally primarily assigned departments and additionally assigned departments, location, cost centers coming from a source system. We see the user accounts. We see IT shop access. We can see business role assignments and responsibilities of that specific employee object. But what can we do for the HR department? And we can help the HR department, as shown on the next slide, with on the next slide, please, with writing back information into the SAP HR system. HR departments are rightfully protective about this data and separating them somewhat from the rest of the organization. With this, they are decoupled from the rest, and data that is being generated for employees on different source systems like phone numbers, email addresses, etc., are not being fed back to the HR system. One Identity's SAP connector has the capability to write back an info type 10105 called communications data info type of the employee record back to SAP. This will allow the organizations to feed back this information into the HR department and into the HR record of that employee. So, in the following slide, we will talk about the integration of SAP Cloud applications into one Identity Manager.
All right, thanks. So just as a brief description here, it's, Jenkins mentioned the fact that, the native SAP connector within Identity Manager provides that full capabilities of actually managing and synchronizing all SAP related objects, including HR or HCM related objects, and the ability to have a bidirectional synchronization between those two systems to have a unified place of record. With that in mind as well, so we've just extended that capability by introducing the Starling Connect. So Starling Connect, as I briefly mentioned earlier, it is a kind of a cloud-based microservice focus platform, which allows us to connect to the various cloud applications. I've listed the SAP related applications due to the nature of this webinar, because we're talking specific around SAP. However, the list of supported applications is intensively, and we have over 40 different connectors that are specific to other cloud applications as well. The idea behind this is that the Starling Connect becomes a repeatable kind of platform where we can quickly develop connectors for the various cloud applications. I think I briefly mentioned at the beginning, it's that we standardize on SCIM to communicate with the identity management system. Outbound, we talk whatever the API is available, REST, OData, SOAP, etc. We take that information, we then convert into a SCIM schema, which then is consumed by the identity management system via its SCIM connector, which then becomes a very easy and repeatable process, so that you can then start onboarding these SAP cloud application as part of your IM process. And we then maintain that data model as well. So the hyperview which you saw, where that correlation of the employee is the central identity and its account in which the identity has access to, will be in the same as it was for the SAP on-prem environment to the cloud applications. In the event that obviously it would be an account per system, depending on the various systems that you're connecting to, because of each of those applications, those cloud applications maintain a separate kind of data model and user repository as well. And of course, each of those applications may have other there's maybe a need to also manage other objects, like roles or permissions or other kind of things that are related to the application, which then is incorporated as overall part of a role process. So it does allow, a customer that has identity management then not just to look at the on-prem SAP environments, but then bring in all these other SAP environments that could be externally as part of their cloud initiative in a hybrid environment. And then just to kind of, I know we're very short on time here, so I just kind of want to just kind of summarize things. I know it's a big picture to tightly digest, but really what we're trying to drive here is that, Identity Manager as well delivers, that unified administration for your SAP environment for both cloud, on-prem. We have the ability to centrally visualize and centrally manage those systems. We can provide that central view for the accounts that reside on the SAP system, either on-prem or in the cloud. Right, we have that. We provide that enhanced SAP compliance and governance with that cross-platform view. And we really talked about SAP today. However, anything else, other environments as well would be part of that, part of the identity management system cross-platform view, which would include other systems, Active Directory, Azure, and name the actual target system. So not just to enhance the SAP compliance against other cross platforms, we're trying to merge that SAP ecosystem with a very good and comprehensive view of both SAP and non-SAP resources. It's to deliver that fine-grained SAP object management that is required for efficient, secure, and way for you to successfully manage your SAP operations. And as Jenkins mentioned, went through those slides, its ability really to provide that SAP optimize SOD verification and enforcement, not only specific to the SAP environments, but more of a broader sense that we can address those compliance initiatives, not just with SAP, but to all, which includes then all non-SAP environments as well. I'm going to pause for a second. There are some questions. In the event that you have a question, please use the question to type in your questions, and we'll have a few minutes to take on a couple of questions. if we're not able to answer all the questions on the remaining time, we'll make sure to write it down, and we'll follow up with response to those questions. But I think there's a question for you here, Cengiz. Can you just once again just elaborate on the advantage of using the Identity Manager versus GRC?
Yes, sure. So the advantage of using Identity Manager for SOD checking over SAP GRC is that we not only are restricted to a single SAP client and are not checking a single SAP user account, but we are more checking on the employee object and on the employee level, including several SAP user accounts into the equation, including additional SAP clients and systems, as well as non-SAP systems. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have a combination of an AD group membership and an SAP transaction with an authorization object, which is the rule violation, you have no chance to check this kind of rules in a single SAP system or through a SAP GRC, for example, but only through one Identity Manager, because we have the overview on the business level, knowing that the specific user account is linked to an employee, another user account that is on a different target system is linked to the same employee, and that the rule checking is actually being executed on the employee level and not only on the user account level.
Great, thanks. Let me look here, see if there's any other questions that we want to take here now. Actually, that was the one main question that I can see here. I mean, I have a hard time reading the question, so what I'll do is that I'll make sure I'll read it and afterwards and provide the feedback. So once again, folks, thank you very much for joining today's webinar. As Brian alluded earlier on, this webinar is being recorded. Within the next couple of days, you will receive information regarding the recording. And for the folks that had questions that I was not able to answer on this call, we'll follow up directly as well. So once again, thank you very much and have yourself a great day.